Stoke City have had quite the ride in recent years, from FA Cup finals to now battling it out at the bottom end of the Championship. Sit back and relax while we discuss the downfall of Stoke City and delve into the series of missteps the club has taken in recent years. Stoke City were synonymous with the Premier League for the best part of a decade between 2008 and 2018. They were well known for their tough tackling nature and, let's face it, master of the dark arts under Tony Pulis, who regularly had them comfortably in mid-table. Mark Hughes replaced the popular manager in 2013 and added some stardust to an already solid side. With additions such as Bojan, Xherdan Shaqiri and Marko Arnautovic, Hughes delivered 3 consecutive 9th placed finishes, which was the highest the club had finished during the modern era. Hughes managed to give that robust Pulis side a real spark, and yet he was the man in charge when everything seemed to go wrong. Always leave them wanting more. That's probably what Hughes should have done looking back on things. Had he bowed out at the end of the 2015-16 season, he would have left the club a hero. Instead, he stuck around and was the first manager to oversee the decline at the club. Now, the warning signs were on the wall the following season in 2016-17, as Stoke would only win 3 games from the end of February until the end of the season. Stoke had nailed their recruitment during Hughes' first few years at the club, but this took an obvious downward spiral from 2016 onwards. By the time the 2017-18 season had rolled around, the hard-working, rigid spine that was built up by Tony Pulis was gone, and the gems that Hughes had signed previously were now badly fading. A club who had originally been built upon hard work and work ethic were no longer up for the fight, as a series of missteps in recruitment had left them with a team of mercenaries. Stoke splurged over 35 million on the likes of Bruno Martins Indi, Kevin Wimmer and Badou Ndiaye during their relegation season, but money couldn't dig them out of the hole they'd already created for themselves. Hughes had his own say on where he thinks things went wrong for the club. As he explained, "I think what happened at Stoke was we had a formula where we didn't spend a great deal and we had to get our main purchase correct. We had to supplement it with good loan deals for good players. We had to have all of those elements work every season, and if I'm honest, in that last year those elements just didn't work. We spent money on the likes of Mbula and it didn't work for us. Our loan deals didn't have the impact that the loan deals had had in previous seasons, and maybe as well the team was getting a little bit older and players needed to be replaced. There were a number of elements in my final year where things didn't go as we'd hoped, but looking back on the full course of my time there, I wouldn't have changed it." Mark Hughes was dismissed in January 2018 and replaced by Paul Lambert, which was nothing short of a disaster. Lambert won just 2 of his 15 matches in charge and ultimately oversaw the club's relegation to the Championship. So Stoke had now been relegated to the Championship after a 10-year stay in the Premier League, but perhaps the drop down could have been seen as a good thing. After all, Stoke would now get the chance to rebuild their squad at a lesser level, and theoretically they would be one of the big fish in the Championship market. But straight away, it seemed as if Stoke had learned nothing from their previous missteps in the Premier League, as their business that summer as a Championship club soon turned out to be pretty disastrous. The club were tipped as the heavy favourites for the Championship this season after splurging over 50 million to bring in some of the league's top talents. Hell, even I predicted them to win the league this year. But hindsight is a wonderful thing in football, and looking back on their recruitment from the summer that year, you can see for yourselves just how many duds they actually bought. And considering the money that was spent and the lucrative contracts that were handed out, the club ended up being shackled with a lot of these players for the next few years to come. As Rowett struggled to get much of a tune out of this Stoke squad, he was ultimately dismissed just a few months into his tenure as Stoke boss in January 2019, and that's when Nathan Jones arrives.
This is where the fun begins.
Jones was a total contrast to some of the managers that Stoke had employed previously, and perhaps this was the kick up the backside that some of those players needed at the time. After all, he'd been hugely successful with Luton Town previously, but the Welsh boss quickly ran into a lot of the same problems that Rowett was dealing with. The mentality and culture that Jones had tried to instill at the club quickly fell upon deaf ears, and after just 38 games in charge, he was dismissed with a miserable win percentage of just 15.7%.
We had a Stoke team in the Championship that on paper should have walked it, but we weren't. We weren't doing very well. And I felt like when he come in, the first speech that he gave was along the lines of, I can't tell you like how to. I'm not going to teach you like how to play. And we all come out the meeting straight away going, That don't make sense. You know, like he already had an inferior attitude to what he was seeing in front of him instead of just taking control. Because all the lads were great lads at Stoke, but he straight away just come across as a little bit insecure. And now I'm looking at all these faces that I've seen in the Prem for so long, and it was like one of the rants that he had, like, oh, I'm gonna bend to what you guys want, which we didn't want nothing. We just want you to just tell us what to do and we'll get it done.
Just a few months into their second season as a Championship club, Stoke are already looking for their third manager since being relegated. Northern Ireland boss Michael O'Neill then oversaw the next 3 or so years at the club. This period can be best described as the reset era. Slowly but surely, Stoke had started to offload some of the big earners off their wage bill, and as the parachute payments started to run out, the club now had to live within their means as a Championship club. What greatly aided Stoke during this time was the young prospects who started to be drip-fed into the first team. Gradually, the likes of Tyrese Campbell, Josh Tymon and Harry Souttar started to make an impact, and as the high earners were being disregarded, a promising younger core started to emerge. By the time the 22/23 season had rolled around, Stoke had a solid enough core, but questions had then started to be asked of O'Neill. While the club had avoided any relegation scares under the Northern Ireland boss, Stoke had finished 3 consecutive seasons in the bottom half under him, and it was tough to see how he'd take this club to the next level, which was into playoff contention. Stoke then went all out for Sunderland boss Alex Neil, and to many people's surprise at the time, they managed to prize him away from the Stadium of Light. Make no mistake, this appointment was seen as a huge deal at the time. I mean, just look at Neil's track record previously. He guided Norwich to the Premier League in emphatic fashion, did some great work as Preston North End boss during his first few years at the club, and then he was the man to bring Sunderland back to the Championship. Neil had been a success at every single club he'd managed before Stoke, and yet the Stoke hot seat proved to be too much for even him. Even though his time at the Bet365 recently ended on a sour note, there were some moments throughout his tenure where it seemed like things were finally heading in the right direction. Neil oversaw a huge rebuilding job in the summer, but despite signing a couple of gems, the majority of the new signings have underwhelmed. To put into perspective of just how bad things have been at Stoke this season, since the start of September, they've only scored 6 goals at home, which is a truly ludicrous stat. Neil was then sacked in December, having lost 4 consecutive matches and leaving the club 20th in the league. Stoke then went in search of their next manager and managed to prize highly rated Steven Schumacher away from fellow Championship side Plymouth, who currently sit above Stoke in the league. Schumacher had made a name for himself at Plymouth, guiding them to promotion from League One and playing a slick brand of attacking football, but even he's found things tough since taking the Stoke job. Having only won 2 of his first 10 matches in charge, Stoke have slipped even closer to the relegation zone during Schumacher's tenure so far. Now, it's worth pointing out that the vast majority of problems at the club right now are by no means Schumacher's fault, but ultimately he's the man responsible for the performances on the pitch right now. Following another grim performance against fellow strugglers Blackburn, the fans made their feelings known to the players, chanting, "You're not fit to wear the shirt." That culture of toxicity has been brewing at Stoke for quite some time, and you can hardly blame the fans with how badly handled things have been since their relegation from the Premier League. After numerous false dawns, it always appears like Stoke find themselves back in the same position in the bottom half of the Championship, having vastly underperformed from the targets that were set out at the start of the season. But something feels even more sinister about the 23/24 campaign. As things stand, the club sit just 3 points above the relegation zone, and with the likes of Huddersfield, QPR and Sheffield Wednesday all picking up their form of late, there's a real chance that Stoke are relegated this season, which would be an absolute disaster for the club. As things stand, Stoke are projected to finish the season with 47 points, but considering their current form, I think it's a real possibility that they finish with less than that. So far this season, they've been the most wasteful side in the league, and they've scored the fewest amount of goals at home. Given the tough run of fixtures that are now right around the corner, relegation does seem like a real possibility this season. Say what you like about the current playing squad, but Stoke were having these issues long before these players arrived. Say what you like about Schumacher, but the problem started long before he arrived, and better managers than him have failed in this job previously. It really seems like a poisoned chalice at Stoke, where the problems have originated from the top downwards. I'd love to get some Stoke fans' perspectives in the comments down below on where you think things have gone wrong over these last next few years? And how real of a possibility do you think there is this season? But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.